All right, welcome back, everyone. Today's explainer is taking us deep into a seriously chilling, lesser-known piece of Goan folklore. We're going to be unpacking a mystery that starts out as a perfectly normal honeymoon, but then completely spirals into this ancient, terrifying legend. If you've ever felt that sudden shiver down your spine while driving down a pitch-dark, isolated road, well, this story is absolutely going to resonate with you. We're looking at the legend of Vajusor, a cursed coffin, and a husband's literal desperate race against time. Okay, let's dive into this. Just imagine for a second waking up with this splitting headache. You look over and your wife is gone. Missing. So you demand answers from your driver, expecting, some kind of logical explanation. But instead, he just looks at you with absolute, pure terror in his eyes and says, "Because the curse is broken, sir." I mean, chills, right? That is exactly what happened to a guy named Aditya. Now, to figure out how Aditya ended up in this literal nightmare scenario and what this broken curse actually means for him, we need to rewind a bit to how this whole thing started. So, the inciting incident here is honestly incredibly mundane, which kind of makes it all the more unsettling. Aditya and his new bride, Sheena, were just wrapping up this beautiful honeymoon in Goa. But instead of just catching a quick flight back to Mumbai, Sheena suggests they take a scenic road trip. Enjoy the greenery, soak in the peace and quiet. Aditya says sure, they hire a local driver named Ramesh, and they hit the road. But as day turns to dusk, the sky gets covered by what the source literally describes as a dark blanket. Their route takes them straight through this incredibly dense, completely isolated forest. The sounds of wild animals are just echoing all around them. And that peaceful drive? Yeah, it quickly morphs into this deeply creepy, super claustrophobic experience. As they're driving through this heavy, suffocating darkness, Sheena is just peering out the window when she sees something utterly inexplicable. Cutting right through the gloom, she witnesses this bizarre procession. She spots four men, and they are pulling this massive, box-like coffin that's bound in these thick iron chains. And these men, they aren't acting normally at all. They're moving like lifeless, unblinking statues while hauling this immense weight. But guys, that is not even the most disturbing part. Trailing right behind this heavy coffin is a group of women, all dressed as brides. Their clothes look ancient, like they've been worn for decades. And they are weeping, just this collective, haunting wail that completely fills the forest air. Now, as Sheena is just staring at this horrifying scene, trying to process it, she notices one detail that absolutely freezes the blood in her veins. 0. That is the exact number of feet actually touching the ground. The four men dragging this incredibly heavy, iron-chained coffin, they're floating. They are literally suspended in the air as they pull it. I mean, it breaks every single law of physics and reality. So, in a moment of pure shock and panic, Sheena yells at the driver to stop the car. And then she makes a truly fatal decision. She grabs her camera and steps out of the safety of the vehicle to film this procession. Now, why on earth did she step out? Maybe it was morbid curiosity or just sheer mind-numbing disbelief. But as she gets closer, gasping at their floating feet, the four men suddenly turn and look directly at her. Instantly, there's this massive, blinding explosion of light. Aditya and the driver are thrown back violently, and when they finally regain their senses and the light fades, the men, the weeping brides, and that massive chained coffin have completely vanished into thin air. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because the horror, unfortunately, doesn't just stay in the forest. Aditya manages to get a deeply traumatized Sheena back into the car, and they speed back to Mumbai. But Sheena brings something back with her. Over the next few days, her behavior goes through this terrifying transformation. First, she just falls into this unnatural, eerie silence. When Aditya finally grabs her hand to confront her, her pupils turn entirely pitch black, and she shoves him away with this completely unnatural force. And then, things get even darker. Every single night, she starts dressing up in her full bridal attire, sitting right in front of the mirror, just humming in this ancient unknown language, and staring blankly out the window, facing the exact direction of the Goan forest. And all of this escalating dread? It culminates in a horrifying midnight abduction. Aditya wakes up one night to find Sheena missing from their bed. He runs outside and is just paralyzed by what he sees. Sheena is standing there in her red bridal dress, and facing her are those same four pale-eyed men from the forest. The giant coffin is right there with them. The door of the coffin slowly creaks open, and this terrifying demon steps out. The demon calls to Sheena, and her pitch-black eyes suddenly turn a hypnotic, glowing red, and she smiles. Aditya tries to run to her, but out of nowhere, dozens of black hands literally erupt from the dirt beneath him, pinning his legs to the ground. As the demon touches Sheena's head, her whole attire transforms. Black sindoor fills her hair parting, a black bindi appears on her forehead, and a garland of black flowers wraps around her neck. And then, surrounded by those mutilated, weeping brides from the forest, Sheena willingly walks away into the darkness with the demon, leaving Aditya screaming until he literally passes out. When Aditya finally wakes up the next morning, his driver Ramesh is standing over him. And Ramesh finally confesses that he knows exactly what took Sheena. He breaks down the lore of Vadasur for him. So what is Vadasur? It is a century-old demon, a monster that specifically hunts newlywed brides. It's actually drawn to villages by the scent of turmeric and henna, the traditional elements of an Indian wedding. Ramesh, who actually comes from the tribal communities around those very Goan forests, grew up hearing these stories from his mother and grandmother. He always thought they were just spooky myths to scare kids, until he saw the monster with his own eyes. To truly grasp the level of danger Sheena is in right now, we have to look at the timeline of this legend. Going back about 100 years ago, Vadasur was absolutely massacring village brides. No bride ever returned. It got so bad that people literally stopped hosting weddings entirely. No drums, no feasts, absolutely no henna. The villages essentially became ghost towns, like graveyards, as people fled the region in sheer terror. Desperate, the villagers who stayed behind sought the help of a powerful tantric. On a totally moonless night, an Amavasya, this tantric challenged the demon. It was this massive, cataclysmic battle that reportedly turned the sky red and shook the earth. But the tantric quickly realized a terrifying truth. Vadasur was completely unkillable. So, using every single ounce of his life force, the tantric did the only thing he could. He sealed the demon inside a spell-bound coffin. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the ingenious yet incredibly tragic security system the tantric set up. You see, he knew that if the coffin just stayed in one place, Vadasur could eventually focus his hypnotic powers and mind control people nearby to come and open it. To prevent this, the tantric summoned the spirits of 4 dead warriors. These are the coffin men. Their eternal punishment, and their sacred duty, was to drag this heavy, cursed coffin through the forest every single night, never stopping, never resting. The goal was to keep the demon constantly in motion and completely disoriented, so he could never, ever escape. But the tantric left one loophole, one highly specific set of conditions that would break the spell. And this brings us right back to the horrible irony of Sheena's actions. The tantric promised the 4 spirit guards that their eternal bondage would end only if a new bride willingly approached the coffin entirely on her own and the 4 spirits laid eyes on her. So, when Sheena ordered the car to stop, grabbed her camera, and willingly walked toward that coffin in the pitch-dark forest, she triggered the exact, incredibly specific mechanics needed to shatter that century-old spell. The spirits were freed from their duty, and Vadasur was unleashed right back into the world. Which brings us to a terrifying ticking clock. Right now, Sheena is a captive. She's sitting deep within the ancient forest ruins in her transformed bridal wear, surrounded by hundreds of dead brides. And the deadline is absolute. The next Amavasya, the upcoming new moon. If she is not rescued by then, the horrific consequence is set in stone. She will permanently become one of those weeping dead brides, bound to Vadasur for all eternity. And this brilliant breakdown leaves us with one massive lingering question. Think about it. 100 years ago, it took a master tantric sacrificing his entire life force just to trap this demon. Now, Aditya, a completely ordinary guy from Mumbai, has to venture into those pitch-black forests, face an unkillable monster, and somehow retrieve his wife before the moon disappears from the sky. So, can Aditya break a century-old curse and save Sheena before the next Amavasya? Or is she already lost to the darkness? It's a terrifying thought to leave you with, and it perfectly showcases just how deeply unnerving ancient folklore can be when it bleeds into the modern world.